I cooked every holiday meal. I wasn't in a single photo. Then I said no at Thanksgiving, skipped Christmas, and left them with a raw turkey in silence. They thought I was just throwing a tantrum. They had no idea that my absence would expose their biggest lies, cost my brother everything, and leave them begging for my forgiveness. Before I tell you about the explosive fallout of the story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Thank you for being here. Grab a glass of warm water, sit down, and listen to me tell the whole story. The heavy silver gravy boat slipped right through my greasy fingers. I didn't even try to catch it. I just stood there and watched it fall. It hit the ceramic floor of my parents' kitchen with a sharp, echoing crack, sending a thick wave of warm, brown liquid splashing across the pristine white tiles and soaking the bottom edge of my apron. In any normal house, a shattered dish on Thanksgiving would bring people running. Someone would ask if I was okay. Someone would grab a roll of paper towels. But from the dining room, exactly 15 feet away down the hallway, all I heard was a roar of laughter, the clinking of crystal wine glasses, the booming, jovial voice of my father, Arthur. "To Carter!" my dad shouted, his voice carrying easily over the jazz music playing softly in the background. "The man of the hour. Thank you for making the time in your incredibly busy schedule to bring this family together today." Another round of cheers erupted. I stood completely frozen in the kitchen, the heat from the double ovens radiating against my back, soaking my shirt in sweat. The perspiration on my forehead suddenly felt ice cold. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. They had started without me. My mom, Eleanor, had promised me just 20 minutes ago. She stood right there by the refrigerator, adjusting her pearl necklace, looking me dead in the eye. "We'll wait for you, Elijah. We will all sit down together once you pull the turkey out and finish the gravy. Take your time, sweetie." But that was before my older brother, Carter, actually walked through the front door. I looked down at the puddle of gravy spreading across the floor. It looked like a Rorschach test of my family's total indifference toward me. I had been in this house since Tuesday night. I had taken 2 unpaid days off work. I had driven to 4 different grocery stores across town just to find the exact brand of organic cranberry sauce my mother demanded. I had been up since 5 in the morning, peeling potatoes until my knuckles were raw, basting a 20-pound bird, and managing 4 different stovetop burners at once. My feet ached so badly I could barely stand straight. Carter had rolled into the driveway exactly 2 hours ago. He was horribly late. He brought absolutely nothing but a bottle of wine that still had a generic liquor store price tag stuck to the bottom. Yet, the moment his designer shoes hit the foyer, my parents' universe shifted on its axis to revolve entirely around him. I slowly bent down, my knees popping loudly in protest against the hard tile. I grabbed a fistful of paper towels and began wiping up the mess. From this angle on the floor, through the crack in the doorway, I had a perfect view of the dining table. I could see my mom leaning over, practically beaming as she refilled Carter's wine glass. I saw my dad clapping him proudly on the shoulder. I saw my Uncle Robert leaning in, hanging on to every single word Carter was saying about his supposedly massive new real estate deals. Not a single one of them was looking toward the kitchen. Not a single one of them noticed there was an empty chair at the table. My jaw tightened. I could feel a hard, painful lump forming in my throat, but I swallowed it down forcefully. I was 30 years old. I was a grown man with a successful career in data risk analysis. But kneeling on that kitchen floor, wiping up gravy while my family celebrated my brother in the next room, I felt like an insignificant child. I threw the soaked paper towels into the trash can. I gripped the edge of the granite counter and pulled myself up. My hands were shaking, not from exhaustion, but from something much deeper. A tectonic shift was happening inside my chest. For 17 years, since I was just a teenager, I had played this role. I grabbed a fresh towel, wiped my hands, and picked up the backup gravy boat I had kept warming on the stove. I filled it to the brim. I walked out of the kitchen and stepped directly into the dining room. To truly understand what happened next, you have to understand how the afternoon had started. At exactly 2 o'clock, a low, aggressive engine roar had vibrated through the living room windows. A silver Porsche 911 pulled into my parents' driveway, the tires crunching loudly over the dry autumn leaves. "He's here. Arthur, Carter is here," my mom had shrieked, literally dropping the decorative napkins she was meticulously folding. She practically sprinted to the front door, her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floor. I was up to my elbows in flour, trying to roll out the pie crusts before the turkey needed its final baste. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the front hallway just in time to see Carter step out of the car. He was wearing a tailored navy blazer, crisp white chinos, and expensive aviator sunglasses, looking like he had just stepped off a yacht rather than completing a 2-hour drive from the city. "Look at this car," my dad had bellowed, walking out onto the porch with a wide grin. "Now that is the machine of an absolute winner. Business must be booming, son." "Can't complain, Dad. Just closed another massive account." Carter flashed his trademark $1 million smile, leaning against the door of the Porsche. He popped the trunk. "Hey, Elijah," he said, barely glancing at me as I stood in the doorway covered in baking flour. "Do me a favor and grab my bags? I don't want to wrinkle the suit. It's linen." I looked at my mom. "Mom, the stove is on. I have 3 pots boiling and the timer is about to go off." She waved her hand dismissively, her eyes completely locked on Carter's vehicle. "Oh, Elijah, just do it quickly. Your brother drove a long way, and his hands are full with the wine. Don't be difficult today." I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste copper. I walked down the concrete steps, past the gleaming Porsche, and hauled Carter's heavy leather duffel bag out of the trunk. I carried it upstairs to the guest room while my family stood in the driveway, admiring the leather seats of a car I wasn't even allowed to touch. I remembered standing in that guest room, dropping his heavy bag on the floor with a thud. The memories came rushing back. I remembered back when we were in our early 20s. I had begged my parents to help me access the small college fund my grandfather had left for us, just so I could avoid taking out predatory student loans for my master's degree. My dad had sat me down in his mahogany-lined study, looked me dead in the eye, and told me that building character meant paying my own way. He said the family money was strictly tied up in long-term investments and couldn't be touched. Yet, here was Carter, flaunting a lifestyle that never quite made sense with his vague job title as a consultant, and my parents treated him like royalty. They never asked him for a dime. They never questioned his choices. I had pushed the resentment down. I told myself it was just for the holidays. I went back downstairs, back into the suffocating heat of the kitchen, and let the rhythmic chopping of vegetables numb my thoughts. I let them treat me like the hired help, because it was infinitely easier than facing the harsh reality that my parents simply loved him more. But staring at that puddle of gravy, something had finally snapped. The years of carrying luggage, biting my tongue, and swallowing my pride had culminated in this one defining moment. I stepped into the dining room. The heavy silver base of the gravy boat made a loud, satisfying thud against the crisp white tablecloth as I set it down directly in the center of the table. The conversation stopped instantly. 5 pairs of eyes briefly snapped up to look at me, clearly annoyed by the interruption to Carter's grand stories. "Finally," Carter sighed, reaching for his wine glass. "I was wondering if we were going to eat this turkey dry. Took you long enough, little brother." My dad didn't even acknowledge my presence. He just grabbed the electric carving knife and started slicing the meat I had painstakingly prepared. "Elijah, honey," my mom said, her eyes fixed on the floral centerpiece rather than my face. "Since you're up, could you run back to the fridge? Carter's wine is getting a little warm. Grab the silver ice bucket from the pantry." The request hung in the air. It was so casual, so painfully routine. I had spent 2 days on my feet. Carter hadn't lifted a single finger. He was sitting in the prime seat at the head of the table, and I was being ordered to fetch him ice before I was even allowed to pull out my own chair. I looked at my mom. Then I looked at Carter's smug, relaxed face. "No." The word slipped out of my mouth before I could fully process it. It was a single syllable, but it landed in the middle of the dining room like a grenade. Carter's mouth hung open mid-sentence. My mom blinked rapidly, her perfectly practiced social smile faltering into a look of sheer confusion. "I'm sorry," she said, letting out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "What did you say?" I said no. My voice sounded strangely deep, steadier than I felt. The trembling in my hands had completely stopped. I stood tall, squaring my shoulders. My dad's face darkened instantly. The carving knife stopped buzzing. He slammed it down on the platter. "Excuse me? Your brother drove 2 hours to be here. He is a guest in this house." 2 hours, I repeated, staring directly into my father's eyes. I didn't blink. "He drove 2 hours. I have been cooking for 2 straight days. I took time off work. I paid for half these groceries with my own salary. I am not getting him ice. If he wants it, he knows exactly where the freezer is." The silence that followed was suffocating. I had broken the ultimate unspoken rule of our family. I had actively challenged the golden child. Uncle Robert let out a loud, mocking snort from across the table. "Geez, Elijah. Someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed today. Don't get so emotional. It's just ice. You've always liked puttering around the kitchen anyway. No need to throw a fit." The blatant disrespect made my blood boil, but I didn't shout. I didn't storm out. Instead, I walked to the far end of the table, pulled out the empty chair, sat down, and pulled my linen napkin onto my lap. I reached for the open wine bottle and poured myself a full glass. I took a long sip. The wine was bitter and dry. When I set the glass down, I caught a movement out of the corner of my eye. Aunt Rachel, my mom's younger sister, was sitting directly across from me. She didn't say a single word, but she looked right at me and gave the absolute slightest sharp nod of approval. My mom quickly cleared her throat, frantically trying to stitch the awkwardness back together. "Well, let's just eat. The turkey looks exceptional this year, Carter. Didn't you say you were thinking about getting a new boat?" Just like that, the current of conversation flowed right over my head, washing away my tiny rebellion. The meal tasted like wet ash in my mouth. I ate quickly, head down, enduring 20 minutes of Carter loudly bragging about his stock portfolio and his golf handicap, before I politely excused myself and retreated back to the kitchen, claiming I needed to check on the pies. The kitchen was quiet. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator. I leaned against the cool granite countertop, closing my eyes, taking deep breaths to try and regulate my racing heart. My mom's iPad was sitting on the counter, the screen glowing brightly. She had left her Facebook app open. I wasn't the type to snoop, but my eyes immediately caught a photo of the dining table she had just posted a few minutes ago. I reached out and scrolled down. "So blessed to have my family together," the caption read. "Thank you to my incredible son Carter for suggesting such a wonderful Thanksgiving menu. The food is absolutely divine. Feeling so proud." My lungs seized up. Carter's menu? Carter didn't even know the difference between sage and thyme. I had spent 3 weeks planning this menu. I had called her 3 times to discuss the recipes, and she was publicly giving him all the credit to her hundreds of friends. My finger hovered over the screen. Almost against my own will, I tapped on her Photos tab. I clicked on the massive album titled Family Holidays. I scrolled through years of carefully curated memories. Christmas of last year, Easter the year before, Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Photo after photo of Carter smiling brightly with mom and dad. Carter opening expensive presents. Carter holding up a glass of champagne. Carter standing in the center of every single frame, glowing under my parents' adoring gaze. I kept scrolling, frantically swiping the screen, looking for myself. I found a picture from my own 25th birthday. It was a wide shot of the living room. Carter was on the couch, laughing hysterically at something my dad said. In the extreme background, completely out of focus, you could see my shoulder and the side of my face as I carried a heavy stack of dirty plates into the kitchen. I found another from Christmas. Just my hand, placing a tray of appetizers on the coffee table. I even found a photo from my grandfather's funeral gathering. Carter was standing front and center, looking solemn in a tailored suit, while I was literally cut out of the frame, visible only by the edge of my jacket as I organized the catering in the back. I scrolled through 140 photos spanning 17 years of my life. I was not the focal point of a single one. I was a blurry arm, a shadow in the background, a pair of disembodied hands serving food. It was undeniable, documented proof. I wasn't a member of this family. I was the catering staff. They had completely erased my existence from their narrative. A cold, heavy numbness spread through my chest, replacing the anger. I set the iPad down carefully. I didn't cry. The pain was far too deep for tears. It was a profound, hollow realization that I had wasted my entire adult life trying to win a game that was rigged against me from the start. "Elijah, where are those pies?" My mom called out from the dining room, her voice laced with impatience. I didn't answer right away. I grabbed the warm pie plates, my hands steady now, gripped by a strange, icy calm. I walked slowly back down the hallway, the hardwood floors creaking slightly beneath my feet. As I approached the dining room, I stopped just outside the doorway. They couldn't see me in the shadows of the hall, but I could hear their conversation perfectly. "So, the new house in Siesta Key," my dad was saying, his voice thick with pride and admiration. 3 bedrooms, right on the water. "It's a very smart investment, Carter. Real estate is the only real wealth." "Yeah, well, I couldn't have closed it without you guys," Carter replied casually, chewing loudly. "That down payment was brutal. The market is insane right now." "Nonsense," Mom cooed, the sound of her pouring more wine echoing in the room. "We're happy to help. A man of your status needs a proper place to entertain. You can't be taking important clients to cramped apartments." I froze in the hallway. My grip on the ceramic pie plates tightened until my knuckles turned stark white. They paid his down payment. 2 years ago, I had found a modest 2-bedroom condo near my office. I had saved diligently for 4 years on my entry-level salary, cutting coupons and skipping vacations, but I was just a few $1,000s short for the closing costs. I had swallowed my pride and asked my parents for a small loan. Not a gift. A loan with interest, fully documented. My dad had lectured me for an hour about living within my means and called me financially irresponsible. He told me that if my salary wasn't enough, I needed to work harder to get a promotion. They didn't give me a single dime. And now, they had secretly handed Carter tens of thousands of dollars for a luxury beach house. Honestly, Uncle Robert chimed in, his voice dripping with condescension and fake sympathy. "It's good you guys gave it to Carter. Elijah wouldn't know what to do with a beach house anyway. He's too timid for that kind of lifestyle. He just likes puttering around the kitchen. He has no ambition. Not a natural leader like you, Carter." I felt the air get violently sucked out of my lungs. Uncle Robert, the man who always patted me on the back at family events and told me I was a good kid. He was the one feeding my parents this toxic narrative. He was the one nurturing the lies, making sure I stayed in my little box so his favorite nephew could shine without competition. I didn't walk into the room. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the pies against the wall, even though every fiber of my being wanted to. I turned around, walked back to the kitchen, and set the pies on the counter. I took off my apron, folded it neatly, and placed it next to the sink. I grabbed my car keys, walked out the back door into the crisp November air, got into my car, and drove the 2 hours back to my apartment in complete silence. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I just left. 3 weeks passed since Thanksgiving. My family didn't reach out to ask why I had left early. They didn't call to check if I had made it home safely. They didn't check to see if I was even alive. The utter silence was my answer. I was completely disposable to them unless I was serving a purpose. Then, on a Tuesday morning in mid-December, my phone buzzed violently on my desk at work. It was a notification from the family group chat. "Mom, exciting news, everyone. Carter is officially hosting Christmas at his gorgeous new beach house in Siesta Key. We are so thrilled to see his new place. I stared at the glowing screen. My stomach immediately knotted up, churning with a familiar, burning acid. I knew exactly what was coming next. Exactly 30 seconds later, a direct message from my mom popped up on my phone. Mom, Elijah, I've sent you the finalized menu for Christmas. Carter wants a prime rib this year, not turkey. Also, his new kitchen is a bit tricky to navigate, so you'll need to prep everything at your place and transport it in coolers. Oh, and Carter has an extremely important client breakfast that morning, so you need to be at his house by 9 a.m. sharp to clean the living room and set the tables before the guests arrive. Don't be late. I read the text 3 times. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I must be misreading it, but I wasn't. The audacity was actually breathtaking. There was no, would you mind helping out? There was no, if you have time, we'd appreciate it. It was a direct, cold assignment of labor. She was ordering me to drive 2 hours to scrub my brother's house and cook a luxury meal for his friends, all while he was out networking and playing the big shot. A sharp, throbbing pain shot behind my right eye, a tension headache flaring up instantly. I tossed my phone face down on the desk and buried my face in my hands, taking deep, ragged breaths. I thought about the logistics. Buying a prime rib large enough for 15 people would cost a fortune. Transporting hot food 2 hours away was a nightmare. And the demand that I act as his personal maid to clean his living room? It was humiliating. Another message chimed. I slowly turned the phone over. Carter. Hey man, make sure you get the good cuts of meat. My clients have expensive taste. Also, bring your own cleaning supplies. I haven't bought any yet. I felt my blood pressure skyrocket. The sheer entitlement radiating from that text message was enough to make me physically nauseous. I pushed my chair back from my desk, walked to the office restroom, and splashed freezing cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked exhausted. There were dark circles under my eyes. I was 30 years old, but I looked 40. I realized, staring at my own reflection, that my body was physically rebelling against the stress. The acid reflux, the insomnia, the migraines, they weren't just random health issues. They were the physical manifestations of swallowing my anger for nearly 2 decades. I dried my face with a paper towel. I knew I couldn't do it anymore, but I didn't know how to stop. Elijah, where is the risk analysis for the Henderson account? I jumped in my seat. My boss, Mr. Davis, was standing right at the entrance of my cubicle. His arms firmly crossed over his chest. His face was stern, his tone completely flat. I'm finishing it up right now, sir. I stammered, frantically clicking my mouse to pull up the massive spreadsheet. I just need to verify the final data sets and format the pivot tables. It was due yesterday at 5 p.m., Davis said, his voice cutting through the hum of the office. Dylan already submitted his half of the project this morning. If you want that senior promotion and the salary bump that comes with it, you cannot be dropping the ball like this. This isn't like you at all, Elijah. You're usually my most reliable guy. I swallowed hard, feeling a flush of deep embarrassment creep up my neck. I looked past Davis's shoulder and saw Dylan, my biggest rival in the department, leaning casually against a filing cabinet. He was sipping a coffee, smirking at me. Dylan was the corporate version of my brother Carter. He was flashy, arrogant, great at talking, and notorious for taking credit for my late nights of number crunching. I'll have it on your desk in exactly 1 hour, I said quietly, keeping my eyes locked on my monitor so I wouldn't have to look at Dylan's smug face. Davis sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. Make sure it's flawless. The client meeting is tomorrow. He turned and walked away. I stared blindly at my screen, the numbers blurring together. I was failing. The overwhelming stress from my family's demands was bleeding directly into the only place I actually had value. I was letting a guy like Dylan beat me because I was too exhausted from carrying the emotional baggage of a family that didn't even like me. I had spent my entire weekend researching prime rib recipes and looking at prices instead of finishing the Henderson report. I was sacrificing my career, my livelihood, and my future to ensure my brother looked good in front of his friends. I gripped the edge of my desk. I was a doormat. At home. At work. Everywhere. I had conditioned everyone around me to believe that my time and my energy were completely free for the taking. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. If I lost this promotion, I would be stuck in this cubicle, making the same salary, struggling to pay my rent, while Carter lived in a beach house funded by my parents. I frantically began typing, forcing my brain to focus on the data. I worked through the lunch hour, ignoring the hunger pangs in my stomach. I compiled the report, double-checked the formulas, and printed it out. I handed it to Mr. Davis with a brief apology. But as I walked back to my desk, the dread settled back in. The Henderson report was done, but the Christmas deadline was still looming over me like a dark cloud. I couldn't outwork this problem. The next day, during my lunch break, I went down to the office cafeteria. I sat alone in a quiet corner booth, staring at a cold, sad turkey sandwich, feeling like I was slowly drowning in a glass of water. My phone sat next to my tray, a constant reminder of the unanswered texts from my mother. Mind if we crash? I looked up, startled. Julian, a guy from the marketing department, and his friend Gabriel from IT were standing there with their lunch trays. Julian was always loud, always laughing, the complete opposite of my usual quiet, reserved demeanor. We had chatted a few times by the coffee machine, but we weren't close. Sure, I muttered, moving my coat so they could sit down. Julian slid into the booth opposite me and took a massive bite of his pizza. He chewed, swallowed, and stared at me. You look like you're heading to a funeral, man. Seriously, what's eating you? You've looked miserable all week. Normally, I would deflect. I would put on a fake smile and say I was just tired from a big project. But something in me was broken. I was too exhausted to lie. Family stuff? I sighed, rubbing my temples. Just holiday expectations. My mom is demanding I drive 2 hours to my brother's new house, clean it, and cook a massive prime rib dinner for his friends while he goes out. Julian stopped chewing. He looked at Gabriel, then back at me, his eyebrows raised high. Wait, seriously? You're going to do that? I don't know, I said, looking down at my sandwich. I always do. It's just being treated like the hired help. It's exhausting. Gabriel shook his head, taking a sip of his soda. Man, biological families are a scam sometimes. Just because you share DNA doesn't mean you owe them your sanity. Julian leaned forward, his expression turning entirely serious. Listen to me, Elijah. Gabriel and I are hosting an orphan Christmas at his place this year. Just a bunch of US who don't want to deal with family drama, politics, or matching pajamas. We drink beer, we order bad Chinese food, we watch terrible movies, and nobody is allowed to stress. You should come. I blinked, surprised by the sudden invitation. I don't know. I hesitated. My mom already gave me a huge list of chores. She'll lose her mind if I don't show up. Julian pointed a French fry at me. Elijah, you're a grown man. You pay your own rent. You earn your own salary. You don't owe anyone your youth or your peace of mind just to keep up appearances. Tell them no. Come hang out with people who actually want you around for you, not for your cooking. It sounded so incredibly simple coming from him. The contrast staggered me. These guys, who I barely knew beyond professional courtesy in the hallways, were actively offering me a space to just exist. They weren't demanding anything from me. They just wanted my company. I'll think about it, I said, a small, genuine smile creeping onto my face. For the first time in weeks, a tiny spark of brilliant light cut through the thick fog in my brain. I didn't have to go. I actually had a choice. That evening, I was sitting on my couch, staring at the dark television screen, when my phone rang. The screen lit up with my mother's contact photo. I let it ring 3 times. My pulse quickened. I took a deep, shaky breath, visualizing Julian's words from earlier that day. You pay your own rent. You earn your own salary. I swiped the screen and answered the call. Elijah. My mom snapped immediately, not even bothering to say hello. You didn't reply to my text. Did you order the prime rib yet? The butcher needs at least a week's notice for a cut that size. And did you buy the silver polish for Carter's new silverware? I stared at the blank wall of my apartment. I gripped the phone tightly. I'm not ordering it, Mom. What? Why not? Carter specifically asked for prime rib. I'm not coming to Carter's house for Christmas, I said. My voice was calm. I didn't yell. I didn't shake. The words came out clear and resolute. Dead silence fell on the other end of the line. For a full 5 seconds, all I could hear was the faint sound of her breathing. What kind of sick joke is this? She finally hissed, her voice trembling with outrage. This is your brother's first time hosting a major holiday. He has incredibly important clients coming to this dinner. He needs you to set up the house and cook. I am not his maid, I replied, the words feeling foreign, dangerous, and incredibly powerful on my tongue. I have my own life, Mom. I am busy. Busy doing what? She scoffed loudly, her voice dripping with pure venom. Sitting alone in your tiny apartment? You are being incredibly selfish, Elijah. Family comes first. We are a unit. Does it? I shot back, the dam finally breaking. The anger I had suppressed for 17 years cracked through my calm facade. Because it seems like Carter always comes first, and I just come over to serve him. I work hard too, Mom. I have a demanding job. I just secured a massive account. But no one in this family has ever asked me how I'm doing. No one has ever acknowledged my life or my career. I'm entirely done playing the caterer. You are breaking your father's heart? She cried, immediately utilizing her favorite, most potent weapon of emotional manipulation. He has been so stressed, and now you are ruining Christmas. Then he can call me and tell me that himself, I said, my voice dropping an octave. But I'm not doing it. Enjoy your prime rib. Merry Christmas, Mom. I pulled the phone away from my ear and hit the red end call button before she could scream another word. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through my chest. My hands were slick with sweat. But as I sat there in the absolute quiet of my apartment, a profound, overwhelming sense of relief washed over me. It felt like I had just dropped a 100-pound weight off my shoulders. I opened my laptop, drafted a quick, polite email to the whole family officially stating I would not be attending the gathering, hit send, and closed the screen. That night, for the first time in a month, I slept soundly through the entire night. 3 days later, my mom demanded we meet in person. She completely refused to accept my email as the final word. She sent a barrage of texts demanding an explanation. To get her to stop, we agreed to meet at the Sunflower Cafe, a small, bustling coffee shop halfway between her house and my office. When I walked in, the smell of roasted espresso and cinnamon hit me. Cheerful Christmas music was playing over the overhead speakers. My mom was already sitting at a corner table in the back. She was wearing her pristine beige cashmere sweater, her posture rigid, her hands tightly clasped around an untouched mug of peppermint tea. And sitting right in front of her on the small wooden table was the thick, heavy leather-bound family photo album, her ultimate weapon of choice. I walked over, pulled out the metal chair, and sat down. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't order anything. Elijah, she started, her voice hushed, playing the role of the deeply wounded matriarch to perfection. She tapped the leather cover of the album with her manicured fingernail. I brought this to remind you of exactly who we are. We are a family. We stick together through thick and thin. Carter really needs you right now. He is under a massive amount of pressure with this new house and his clients. I didn't blink. I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. I placed it squarely on top of her photo album. What is this? She asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. Data, I said calmly. It's what I do for a living. I analyze facts. I look at patterns. I flipped the folder open. Inside are the documented facts of my existence in this family. 32 family gatherings over the last 17 years. I arrived an average of 4 hours early to every single one to prep the kitchen, and stayed 3 hours late to clean up the garbage. Total hours of unpaid labor, Over 400. Her face began to drain of color. She looked around the cafe nervously to see if anyone was listening. Elijah, keep your voice down. We appreciate what you do. No, you appreciate what I provide. I corrected her, my voice low but sharp as broken glass. There is a massive difference. I pulled out 2 high-quality printed photos from her Facebook page. This is last Easter. This is Thanksgiving. Find me in these pictures, Mom. Point to your son. She stared down at the glossy photos. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her finger hovered over the paper, shaking slightly, unable to find my face because I simply wasn't there. When was the last time someone took a picture of me actually sitting at the table, eating a warm meal? I asked, leaning forward. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting away. You're being overly dramatic. You know your father and I won't be around forever. Are you really going to throw away your entire family over some petty jealousy about your brother's success? I reached into the folder one last time and slid a printed piece of paper across the table. It was a flight confirmation. I'm not jealous of Carter, I said, looking her dead in the eye. And I'm not throwing anything away. I am spending Christmas in Key West with Julian and Gabriel. People who actually want my company, not my servitude. I leave on the 23rd. She stared at the flight itinerary like it was a death warrant. The realization finally hit her. I wasn't bluffing. Her reliable kitchen servant had just resigned. But what about Carter's dinner? She stammered, genuine panic leaking into her voice. He doesn't know how to cook. Then he better learn how to use a microwave, I said. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and walked out of the cafe. The fallout from the cafe meeting was swift, but surprisingly, it didn't come directly from my parents. They went completely radio silent. The next evening, I was in my bedroom packing my suitcase for Key West when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Emily, my younger cousin. She was Uncle Robert's daughter, but unlike her manipulative father, she was actually a decent, honest person. Elijah? She whispered into the phone, her voice sounding frantic and breathless. Are you really not cooking for Christmas? I'm not, Em. I'm sorry if it ruins the food for you, I said, folding a t-shirt. No, I don't care about the food, she said, her voice dropping even lower, sounding like she was hiding inside a closet. Elijah, you need to know what's really going on with Carter. You have to know the truth. I stopped folding. What do you mean? Dad was drinking wine last night and he let it slip to Mom. Emily breathed out rapidly. Carter's big new job is a total scam. He's completely drowning in debt. He's practically facing bankruptcy. That fancy Porsche is leased and he's 3 months behind on payments. They are going to repossess it. And that beach house. My stomach dropped to the floor. What about the house, Emily? Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Arthur didn't just give him a down payment, she whispered, her voice shaking. They leveraged their entire retirement fund. They secretly co-signed the massive mortgage. Carter desperately needs this Christmas dinner to impress a massive client, a guy named Mr. Sterling. If he doesn't land this consulting contract, he loses the house, and your parents lose their entire retirement. I gripped the phone, absolutely stunned. The golden boy wasn't just arrogant. He was a colossal fraud who was actively sinking my parents' financial future. And they were all counting on me to cook a fancy dinner to help him maintain his pathetic illusion of wealth. Thank you for telling me, Em, I said softly, my mind racing. There's one more thing, she added nervously. Nathan called Dad today. Nathan, my older cousin, the guy I had tutored through college for free, the guy who always pretended to be my friend at family barbecues. Nathan told Dad that he called you yesterday pretending to check in, just to confirm if you actually bought tickets to Key West. He's reporting your every move back to Carter. They were hoping you were bluffing. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. The betrayal stung sharply, but it also crystallized absolutely everything. My family wasn't just ignoring me. They were actively plotting to manage me. They viewed me as an asset to be deployed. Let them, I told Emily. Let them report whatever they want. I hung up the phone. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt an incredible, chilling sense of clarity. Carter was building a massive house of cards, and my parents were standing right underneath it, desperately demanding that I hold up the walls for them. I zipped my suitcase shut with a sharp, final sound. For the first time in my entire life, I wasn't going to fix their mess. I was going to step back, get on a plane to the beach, and let gravity do its job. They thought I was just being stubborn about cooking a piece of meat. They had absolutely no idea that the client Carter was trying to impress, Mr. Sterling, was the exact same CEO my analytics firm had just saved from a multimillion-dollar data breach 2 weeks ago. And they had no idea that Mr. Sterling knew exactly who I was. Fan 5.1. Hai Bao Kong Kai Jong Sin So 2. 1350. The Florida sun beat down on my shoulders, warm and incredibly bright. I dug my bare feet into the soft, white sand of Key West. The ocean breeze tasted like salt and total freedom. Julian handed me an ice-cold beer, condensation dripping down the side of the glass bottle. Gabriel was laughing loudly at a joke, adjusting his sunglasses. It was Christmas Eve. For the past 17 years, at this exact hour, I would be elbow-deep in a turkey cavity or frantically scrubbing down a stovetop while my mother hovered over me, criticizing my chopping technique. I would be sweating, stressed, and completely invisible. But not today. Today, I was sitting under a palm tree, miles away from the toxic bubble of my family. I took a long sip of my beer. I had never tasted anything so sweet. My phone vibrated in the pocket of my swim trunks. I pulled it out. It was a text message from Aunt Rachel. She had promised to keep me updated on the inevitable disaster unfolding at Carter's new beach house. I opened the message and smiled. Aunt Rachel, you are not going to believe this. Total chaos. Carter bought a 20-pound frozen prime rib yesterday. He just realized you actually have to thaw it. He put it in the oven frozen solid an hour ago. The smoke alarm just went off. Your mother is having a meltdown. I read the text out loud to Julian and Gabriel. Julian threw his head back and roared with laughter, slapping his knee. Frozen solid? Gabriel choked on his beer. Are you kidding me? He's going to serve his VIP client a block of bloody ice wrapped in charcoal. I typed back quickly. Tell them to try the microwave. What about the side dishes? My phone buzzed again almost instantly. Aunt Rachel. What side dishes? Carter thought you were bluffing. He thought you would show up at the last minute to save him. When 9 a.m. rolled around and you weren't here to clean, he panicked. He tried to make mashed potatoes from a box, but he didn't boil the water first. It's essentially wallpaper paste. Your father is screaming at Uncle Robert to go find an open grocery store, but everything in Siesta Key is closed. I leaned back in my beach chair, letting the warm sun wash over my face. I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. For years, my family had operated on the assumption that I would always be there to absorb their stress, fix their mistakes, and make them look good. They had weaponized my sense of duty. They had treated me like a safety net that they could jump on with muddy shoes. I was officially done being the net. Let them hit the ground. I locked my phone, tossed it into my beach bag, and ran into the turquoise water with my friends. We swam. We ate fresh seafood at a local shack, and we watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Nobody yelled at me. Nobody asked me to fetch them ice. Nobody made me feel small. Meanwhile, 2 hours north in Siesta Key, the golden illusion of my brother Carter was rapidly burning to the ground. I got the full, agonizing play-by-play from Aunt Rachel later that night when I called her from the balcony of my hotel room. She stepped out onto Carter's back patio to talk, keeping her voice to a hushed, dramatic whisper. Elijah, it was a massacre, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed laughter. I almost feel bad for him. Almost. At exactly 6 p.m., a sleek black town car had pulled up to Carter's driveway. Mr. Sterling, the CEO of the massive tech firm Carter was trying to land a consulting contract with, stepped out. He was an older man, sharp, observant, and completely no-nonsense. He brought his wife, a woman adorned in subtle, expensive jewelry. Carter greeted them at the door. According to Rachel, Carter was sweating profusely through his designer linen suit. The house smelled strongly of burnt meat and aerosol air freshener. Carter tried to play the charming host, Rachel whispered over the phone. He poured them expensive scotch, gave them a tour of the house, and kept talking about his vision for the consulting firm. But you could tell Mr. Sterling wasn't buying the act. He kept looking around, noticing the dust on the baseboards, the messy kitchen visible from the hallway. When they finally sat down at the dining table, the real nightmare began. My mother, trying desperately to save face, brought out the prime rib. The outside was charred completely black, while the inside was practically raw, cold meat. The boxed mashed potatoes were crunchy. The store-bought dinner rolls were burnt to a crisp because my dad had forgotten to take them out of the oven. Mr. Sterling stared at his plate. He politely cut a piece of the meat, saw the blood pooling on the porcelain, and set his knife down. His wife took one bite of the potatoes and discreetly spit it into her napkin. The silence at the table was deafening. Carter started to panic. His slick corporate facade cracked. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice was shaking. "I have to apologize, Mr. Sterling," Carter had said, wiping his forehead with a napkin. "Usually our family dinners are impeccable. But unfortunately, my younger brother decided to be incredibly selfish this year. He usually handles the cooking, but he threw a massive temper tantrum and abandoned the family at the last minute to go party with his friends." Aunt Rachel said she gripped her wine glass so hard it almost shattered. My mother immediately chimed in, perfectly playing her role. "It's true, Richard," she sighed, putting a hand on her chest. "Elijah has always been the difficult one. He's incredibly jealous of Carter's success. He knew how important this dinner was for Carter's career, and he intentionally ruined it just to spite us. It breaks a mother's heart." Uncle Robert leaned across the table, nodding gravely. "The kid has no ambition. He's just a low-level data cruncher. He resents Carter for actually making something of himself. We try to include him, but he's just a bitter person." They sat there, in a house funded by my parents' drained retirement accounts, eating a ruined meal, and they collectively blamed the entire disaster on me. They used my name as a shield to protect Carter's massive ego. Mr. Sterling sat quietly. He didn't touch his food. He looked at Carter, then at my parents, then at Uncle Robert. "A low-level data cruncher?" Mr. Sterling asked, his voice suddenly very cold, completely dropping the polite dinner guest tone. "What exactly is your brother's name?" "Fan 5.3, Ku Twist Teat Low Chin, So 2. 1450, Elijah," Carter answered, waving his hand dismissively. "Elijah Vance. He works for some mid-size risk management firm up in the city. He just sits in a cubicle all day looking at spreadsheets. Nothing important." Aunt Rachel told me the temperature in the dining room plummeted by 10 degrees. Mr. Sterling slowly placed his linen napkin on the table. He looked directly into Carter's eyes. "Elijah Vance," Mr. Sterling repeated. The name hung in the air like a judge's gavel. "From Apex Risk Analytics?" Carter blinked, confused. Yeah, that's the one." "Why?" Mr. Sterling stood up from the table. His wife immediately stood up next to him. "2 weeks ago," Mr. Sterling said, his voice echoing loudly in the high-ceiling dining room, "my company's entire back-end server system was targeted by a highly sophisticated ransomware attack. It was a localized breach that bypassed our primary firewalls. We were 48 hours away from losing millions of dollars and compromising the private data of thousands of our clients." My parents stared at him, completely lost. Carter's face went completely pale. "We hired Apex Risk Analytics to find the leak," Mr. Sterling continued, his eyes narrowing in disgust. "They put their best analyst on it. A young man who worked 72 hours straight, slept under his desk, built a custom algorithm, isolated the corrupted nodes, and saved my company from absolute ruin. I personally shook his hand last Friday." Mr. Sterling leaned forward, resting his knuckles on the dining table. "That man's name was Elijah Vance, and he is far from a low-level data cruncher. He is one of the most brilliant, dedicated, and hard-working professionals I have ever had the pleasure of doing business with. The silence in the room was absolute. My mother's mouth hung open. Uncle Robert looked like he had been slapped across the face. Carter looked like he was going to throw up. "You brought me into your home," Mr. Sterling said, turning his piercing gaze directly on my father. "You served me raw food. You lied about your own capabilities. But worst of all, you sat here and cowardly assassinated the character of a man who has more integrity in his little finger than this entire table combined. You blamed your own failures on him." Mr. Sterling looked at Carter one last time. "I came here tonight to finalize a $2 million consulting contract with you, Carter, because you talked a big game. But if this is how you treat your own family, if this is the complete lack of accountability and leadership you show when things go wrong, I wouldn't trust you to consult on a lemonade stand." Mr. Sterling pulled out his wallet, threw a $100 bill onto the ruined prime rib, and grabbed his wife's coat. "To cover the cost of the dry cleaning for my wife's dress after sitting in this smoke-filled house," he said. "Do not contact my office again." Mr. Sterling and his wife walked out the front door. The heavy oak door slammed shut with a boom that rattled the windows. Carter collapsed into his chair, putting his head in his hands. The Golden Boy's entire world had just shattered into a million pieces. The contract was gone. The house was gone. The illusion was dead. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment one below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. I woke up the next morning in Key West to the sound of seagulls and crashing waves. I stretched, feeling incredibly rested. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. I had 14 missed calls from my mother, 6 from my father, and 22 frantic text messages from Carter. I didn't open a single one of them. Instead, I called Aunt Rachel. She answered on the first ring. "Elijah, Merry Christmas. I hope you are drinking a mimosa." "Merry Christmas, Aunt Rachel. Give me the damage report." She let out a long, exhausted sigh, but I could hear the deep satisfaction in her tone. It was an absolute bloodbath after Sterling left. Carter completely broke down. He started screaming at your parents, blaming them for the ruined dinner. He told them they should have forced you to come. "Classic Carter," I muttered, walking out onto my hotel balcony. "But it gets better," Rachel said, lowering her voice. "Your mother started hyperventilating, realizing that without that contract, Carter is going to default on this house. Your dad started demanding answers about Carter's finances. And that's when Emily stepped in. My brave little cousin. Emily stood up in front of everyone," Rachel continued proudly. She pointed right at Uncle Robert and loudly announced that Robert knew Carter was broke months ago. She exposed the fact that Robert actively convinced your parents to leverage their retirement to bail Carter out, just so Robert could keep riding Carter's coattails. I gripped the balcony railing. "What did my dad do?" "He exploded," Rachel said. "He grabbed Uncle Robert by the collar and threw him out of the house. Your dad realized that Robert had been manipulating him for years, feeding him lies about you being lazy, just to ensure Carter got all the financial support. The entire family structure just collapsed, Elijah. They are turning on each other like hungry wolves. It's exactly what they deserve." I looked out at the vast, endless blue ocean. For 17 years, I thought I was the problem. I thought I was defective. But the truth was, I was the only sane person standing in the middle of an insane asylum. I was the glue holding their fake, perfect image together. The moment I walked away, the entire facade violently crumbled. "Enjoy your beach day, honey," Aunt Rachel said softly. "You earned it. Don't answer their calls. Let them sit in the mess they made." I thanked her, hung up, and joined Gabriel and Julian for a massive pancake breakfast by the pool. I left my phone in the room. I spent Christmas Day laughing until my ribs hurt, completely unburdened by the crushing weight of my family's expectations. The first week of January, I returned to the office. The holiday decorations were down, and the reality of the new year had set in. I was sitting at my desk when Mr. Davis called me into his glass-walled office. Dylan was standing near the water cooler, giving me a smug, arrogant look, clearly expecting me to get reprimanded again. I walked into the office and sat down. Mr. Davis didn't look angry. He looked incredibly impressed. "Elijah," he said, handing me a thick folder. "I got a personal phone call from Richard Sterling right before the holidays. He told me about the situation with his servers. He also told me about the interesting family dinner he attended in Siesta Key." I felt my face flush. "Mr. Davis, I apologize if my personal life—" He held up a hand to stop me. "Elijah, Richard Sterling specifically requested that you be the lead data architect on all of his future accounts. He said you have a rare combination of technical brilliance and unshakable integrity. That's high praise from a man who doesn't easily hand out compliments." Mr. Davis tapped the folder. "We are officially promoting you to senior risk analyst. You'll be taking over the department. Dylan will be reporting directly to you from now on. The new salary bump is effective immediately." I walked out of that office feeling 10 feet tall. I looked over at Dylan. His smug smile completely vanished when he saw the senior badge in my hand. He looked down at his shoes and quickly scurried back to his cubicle. I sat down at my desk. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. I decided it was finally time to face the music. I picked up the phone. "Elijah?" Her voice was completely broken. She sounded like she had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. "Oh my God, you finally answered. Elijah, please, we need you." "Need me to cook another turkey?" I asked coldly. "Don't do that," she sobbed. "Please." "Carter lost the house. The bank is foreclosing. He had to give the Porsche back. Your father and we are in terrible trouble. The bank is coming after our retirement funds because we co-signed. We need a lawyer. We need help." I leaned back in my office chair. I looked out the window at the city skyline. "Elijah, you just got that big promotion, right?" she pleaded, clearly having pumped Aunt Rachel for information. "Your salary is much higher now. You can help us hire a good lawyer. We can fight this. We are family." I let her desperate words hang in the air. I thought about the thousands of hours I spent serving them. I thought about the college fund they refused to let me touch. I thought about the photo albums where I didn't exist. "No, Elijah, please," she cried out. "You can't just abandon us. Carter is your brother. Carter is a 32-year-old man who built his life on a foundation of lies," I said, my voice steady, completely devoid of emotion. "And you and Dad handed him the bricks. You paid for his down payment. You believed Uncle Robert's toxic gossip. You treated me like a servant for 17 years. We were wrong," she wailed. "We see that now. Please, forgive us." "I do forgive you, Mom," I said honestly. The anger was truly gone, replaced by a cold, hard indifference. "I forgive you because holding on to the anger is exhausting. But forgiving you doesn't mean I am going to save you. I am not giving you my salary. I am not paying for a lawyer. You made a terrible investment in Carter. Now you have to deal with the bankruptcy." I paused, letting the finality of my decision sink in. "Do not call me asking for money again. If you do, I will block this number permanently. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up the phone. I didn't feel guilty. I felt completely, beautifully free. 11 months passed. The leaves on the trees outside my new apartment window turned a brilliant shade of burnt orange and deep red. It was Thanksgiving Day. But this time, the air wasn't filled with tension, screaming, or the smell of burnt food. My apartment smelled incredible. I had garlic roasting in the oven, fresh rosemary on the counter, and a massive pot of apple cider simmering on the stove. I was standing in the kitchen, but I wasn't alone. Julian was at the cutting board, aggressively chopping onions and wearing a ridiculous apron that said, "Kiss the cook." Gabriel was trying to figure out how to use my electric mixer to make whipped cream, sending white splatters all over the cabinets. Aunt Rachel was sitting at the kitchen island, sipping a glass of wine and laughing hysterically at them. My cousin Emily was setting the table. "Elijah, tell Julian he's doing it wrong," Gabriel shouted over the noise of the mixer. "The onions are too chunky. Worry about your cream, tech boy," Julian shot back, tossing an onion peel at him. I stood there, holding a basting brush, and just smiled. This was my kitchen. These were my rules. There was no hierarchy here. We were a team. If the food burned, we would order pizza and laugh about it. There was no golden child to impress. There was no toxic matriarch judging my every move. When the food was finally ready, we all carried the heavy dishes to the dining table together. The table was a mismatched collection of plates and silverware, far from the pristine, intimidating crystal settings my mother used to demand. But it was beautiful. It was real. We sat down. We poured wine. We started passing the bowls of potatoes and stuffing around the table. "Wait, hold on." Emily suddenly stood up, pulling her phone out of her pocket. "We need a picture. Everyone squeeze in." Julian leaned over and threw his arm heavily around my shoulder, pulling me right into the center of the frame. Gabriel photobombed from the back. Aunt Rachel smiled brightly next to me. Emily snapped the photo. She looked at the screen and grinned. She handed the phone to me. I looked at the image. Right there, dead center, surrounded by people who actively chose to be there with me, was my face. I looked genuinely happy. I wasn't a blurry arm in the background. I wasn't a shadow carrying plates. I was the focal point of my own life. I saved the photo to my favorites. We ate, we drank, and we stayed up until 2 in the morning playing horrible board games. It was the best Thanksgiving of my entire life. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was my father's cell phone number. He hadn't called me directly, without my mother acting as an intermediary, in over 5 years. I let it ring twice before I picked up. "Hello, Elijah." His voice sounded incredibly old. It lacked the booming, authoritative resonance that used to shake the walls of our childhood home. He sounded tired, defeated. "Hi, Dad. How are you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He let out a long, heavy breath. "I'm surviving, son. Just surviving." The silence stretched between us. I didn't rush to fill it. I didn't try to comfort him. I just waited. "Carter moved back home," my dad finally said, the words sounding like ash in his mouth. "The bank took the beach house in Siesta Key. They repossessed the Porsche 3 months ago. He filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. He's sleeping in your old bedroom." I closed my eyes. The inevitable had finally happened. The house of cards had completely flattened. "He doesn't do anything," my dad continued, his voice cracking slightly. "He just sits in the basement playing video games. He blames the economy. He blames Mr. Sterling. He blames everyone but himself. I tried to get him to apply for a job at the local hardware store, but he said it was beneath him." My dad paused. I could hear him swallow hard. "Elijah, you were right. You were right about everything." I was so blinded by his smooth talking. I wanted to believe he was a massive success because it made me feel successful as a father. I ignored the signs. And worse, I ignored you. Hearing my father, the man who always demanded perfection, the man who called me weak and unambitious, admit his catastrophic failure was surreal. It didn't bring me the immense joy I thought it would. It just made me feel a profound sense of pity for him. "I'm sorry about your retirement funds, Dad," I said quietly. "We'll manage," he said, though he didn't sound convincing. "We're downsizing the house. We have to sell it to cover the massive debts we co-signed. Uncle Robert won't even return my phone calls. The moment the money dried up, he vanished." "That sounds exactly like Robert," I replied. "Elijah." My dad's voice trembled now, stripping away the last remaining layers of his immense pride. "I am so deeply, truly sorry for how I treated you. I was a fool. I pushed away the only son who actually had character. The only son who actually worked hard. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at the Thanksgiving photo I had printed and framed on my living room wall. I already forgave you, Dad, I said. A long time ago. I had to, for my own peace of mind. Does that mean we can see you? He asked, a desperate hope clinging to his words. I took a deep breath. This was the critical moment. The old Elijah would have caved instantly. He would have driven back to their house, cooked them a massive meal to make them feel better, and slipped right back into the familiar role of the reliable servant. But that guy was dead. He died on the floor of my parents' kitchen, wiping up spilled gravy. You can see me, Dad, I said firmly. But things are going to be fundamentally different. Anything, he agreed quickly. Whatever you want. Christmas is in a few weeks, I said. Julian and Gabriel are coming over to my apartment. Aunt Rachel and Emily will be here too. You and Mom are welcome to join us. Carter is not invited. I will not have his toxic energy in my home. My dad hesitated for a fraction of a second, the instinct to protect his golden child flaring up, but reality quickly crushed it. Okay, we understand. Carter will stay home. And Dad, I added, my tone hardening just enough to let him know I was absolutely serious. I am not cooking a 5-course meal. We are making tacos. Everyone is bringing an ingredient. If you and Mom come, you are on guacamole duty. You will stand in my kitchen, you will chop the avocados, and you will help me clean the plates afterward. Tacos? My dad repeated, a small, genuine chuckle escaping his lips. It was the first real laugh I had heard from him in a decade. I haven't chopped a vegetable in 30 years, Elijah. But I will watch a YouTube tutorial. We will make the best guacamole you've ever had. We'll see about that, I smiled. Thank you, son, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for giving us a second chance. We hung up the phone. I didn't know if the Christmas dinner would be awkward. I didn't know if my mother would be able to handle not being the center of attention. I didn't know if my parents would truly change long-term, or if they were just humbling themselves because they had hit rock bottom. But for the first time in my life, I realized it didn't actually matter. My happiness was no longer permanently tied to their validation. They were entering my world now, playing by my rules. If they crossed the line, I had the ultimate power to simply open the front door and ask them to leave. I held all the cards. I was the architect of my own life. I stood up from the couch and walked over to the framed photo hanging on the wall. I traced my finger over the glass, right over my own smiling face. The journey from that miserable Thanksgiving night in the kitchen to this quiet, peaceful Sunday afternoon had been the hardest year of my life. Walking away from the only family you have ever known is terrifying. It goes against every instinct ingrained in you since childhood. Society tells you that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, and that you must endure the abuse because they are your parents. But blood doesn't give anyone a free pass to destroy your mental health. DNA is not an unbreakable contract for perpetual servitude. I had spent 17 years setting myself entirely on fire just to keep my brother and my parents warm. And they didn't even have the decency to thank me for the heat. They just complained that the flames weren't bright enough. The moment I stopped providing the fuel, the moment I established an ironclad boundary and said the word, no, their entire universe fell apart. That wasn't my fault. That was the natural consequence of building a family dynamic on exploitation and lies. I looked at the picture one last time before turning off the living room light. I am not a servant. I am not a shadow. I am Elijah Vance. I am a successful analyst, a loyal friend, and a man who finally knows his own immense worth. I built a beautiful, peaceful life from the ashes of their expectations, and I wouldn't trade this peace for all the approval in the world. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive some of these moments, but sharing it feels incredibly freeing. I hope this resonated with you in some way. I hope that if you are the one always standing in the kitchen while everyone else celebrates, you realize that you have the power to put the plates down and walk out the door. Your life belongs to you. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation? Have you ever had to cut off toxic family members to save your own sanity? Please tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And finally, if you watched this video all the way to this exact second, I want you to comment the letter W down below. W stands for winner. That is our secret code for the 1% Club, the incredibly amazing group of people who stick around until the very end and support this channel. It lets me know exactly who the real ones are. Please don't forget to hit that like button and follow the channel so we can stay connected. Take care of yourselves, know your worth, and I will see you in the next story.